Before you is a wondrous, vibrant carnival. Sweethearts stroll hand in hand, munching on delectable treats. A glittering Ferris wheel rotates nearby. Strangely dressed clowns roam through the crowds. There are many tents, most emblazoned with colorful signage. In the distance, a huge castle looms over the carnival. Large letters spell out Heckna's Funhouse over the facade of a clown's face. His face is painted in an enthusiastic expression, eyes wide and mouth open. Although painted, the clown's eyes seem to follow you everywhere. And as you look into the crowd, the very same figure whose face you just saw emblazoned on the front of this building approaches you. Hecna himself is coming through the crowd of the Revelia, and what you see is a tall figure bedecked in very festive, ornate garb. He wears a version of a jester's hat with these kind of colorful appendage-like pieces of fabric protruding out. And his face is not a normal humanoid face with normal skin and normal features. What you see is a very mask-like face. And through this mask, he is still able to convey expressions. And the expression that he conveys to you is one of joy and a little bit of mischief.
Hello and welcome to Making a Monster, the weekly podcast where game designers show us a monster of their choice and we discover how it works, why it works, and what it means. I'm Lucas Zellers. I have to apologize for the audio quality on this week's episode. I'm moving this month and recording in some different places, but I won't apologize for the monster we're covering. A lot of D&D supplements are launched through Kickstarter, and some of the most polished have come from Hit Point Press, including the Deck of Many, the Humblewood Academy, and most recently, the Heckna Carnival Horror campaign setting. This week, my guest is a lead writer on that project.
My name is Ashley Warren, and I'm a writer, narrative designer, educator. I've worked on lots of projects in the tabletop RPG industry, most notably the Uncaged Anthology and Rime of the Frost Maiden, the recent Wizards of the Coast hardcover release, and Heckna, which is what we'll be talking about today.
When I conceived the show, your name was at the top of my list, because I've been on the DMs Guild since 2018. That top selling bar has had Uncaged smack in the middle of the top 10 for ages.
The Uncaged Anthology is a series of adventure anthologies, all for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Each adventure subverts the tropes surrounding a female creature from mythology or folklore. And the anthology was created by more than 100 artists and writers from around the world, all of whom have a passion for monsters. So I feel like this podcast is a good fit for me as someone who loves monsters. I didn't pick something Uncaged related for our topic today. What I thought would be best is to talk about Heckna from the recent Heckna Kickstarter.
Oh, I had no idea you were involved with that.
Yeah, so my title is lead writer. I have been working on that for pretty much the whole year. So I thought it would be fun to talk about the titular character, Heckna, because he is his own monster and has his own monster design that we've put a lot of thought into. The one thing I can't probably do yet, since the book isn't out, is to talk too much about the specific stats, but I can talk a little bit about the features that he has as a monster and things like that. Heckna is, in many ways, your typical evil clown, but there's a lot that makes him different. I mean, it's different than an NPC, which Heckna also is, but yeah, Heckna is a full creature. He's the villain of the book. So the goal is that characters encounter him and potentially defeat him. Characters can encounter him at any point. It's very similar to Curse of Strahd, where you can encounter Strahd fairly early in the campaign, and a lot of people do. With Heckna, it's kind of the same scenario. He's very much present at the Revelia, which is the setting of the book. The Revelia is his own creation, so he's inextricably tied to this dark carnival setting. It's something that he's created, that he's been building for years, and he is so closely linked to the Revelia, it can't really exist without him, and he can't exist without it. So he is he's ever present in this locale. His face is on everything, including posters and the rides and things like that. So it is very much Heckna's own domain. In many ways, Heckna and the Revelia setting are classic clowns, classic carnival settings. We definitely wanted to hone in on the familiarity of those environments, because there's something that's just so fun about a carnival setting. But what's fun about a carnival setting is also that you can make it really dark and kind of messed up, or you can really like put a lot of your own spin on that. So in that sense, Heckna is very much an evil clown, similar to, Pennywise. Although I will say that my influence for Heckna is a little bit more Tim Burton-esque. I'm a huge Tim Burton fan. I'm trying to think of a good word to describe it. Just the kind of general air that both Heckna and Jack Skellington give off. They're these people that lots of others look to as leaders. They are able to amass followers who believe in their vision for something. So for Jack Skellington, it was like his version of Christmas. And for Heckna, it's his version of the Revelia. And so I really enjoyed that part of Jack Skellington's character, how he's able to really get people to follow his creative vision as wild as it gets. And so for Heckna, it's that, but ramped up to like 11. It's Heckna like has no like limits on things. And so he'll do anything to tell a good joke, even though sometimes what he considers to be a good joke, no one else considers to be a good joke, which I think is fun for a dungeon master to embody that about Heckna. And then also, I think Heckna really represents kind of the classic court jester, especially in appearance. A lot of his actual costuming and design was inspired by Venetian carnival masks and kind of classic Renaissance era jesters that you would see across Europe and different courts. And I think that aesthetic is really fun and kind of different from the clowns that we see portrayed in a lot of pop culture. The Heckna aesthetic is a mix of this like classic carnival, circus, sideshow era type aesthetic mixed with campy horror flicks. So there's a lot of like anachronisms in the story as well, which is really fun.
How are they embodied or changed or remixed in the person of Heckna himself as you've presented him?
He's been very particular about how he chooses to present himself, which I find really interesting. And at one point he was a person. Who he is now is the result of a lot of this twisted magic that he's kind of sacrificed over the years to make the Revelia. So he's kind of transcended just normal humanity. But I find that kind of an interesting part of his character. So I will say that Heckna is certainly driven by nefarious motivations. I think in a way that he reminds me a lot of people on like social media who are always just trying to make a joke, even when it's not the appropriate time to make a joke. And that's like always so incredibly frustrating, is when people don't like really take into account like the tone of something. And that's totally Heckna. He just doesn't really care. He'll just make a joke no matter what. And that's what makes him both amusing, but also just dangerous, is that nothing really seems to, he doesn't react to things the way that a lot of normal people would expect to react to things like, grotesque situations. And so I think as a villain, that's what makes him interesting to go up against, is that it's not just this cut and dry situation of, oh, we'll just dispatch the villain and that's it. Like he's like roped in all of these people to be a part of his world. And so when you remove Heckna from the world, there's impact there. I think that a lot of the motivations that players may experience when they're at the Revelia to confront Heckna is just seeing how he's built the Revelia and kind of the cost that has required from the people who are part of the Revelia. So there's, a group of, party goers who are called the revelers, and they, are found throughout the Revelia. But to really become a true reveler, you have to basically give up your identity, and you just are agreeing to get lost in the Revelia for, eternity potentially. And also there's the creatures that Heckna has created are not always very pleasant. And so there's just kind of, even though there's fun to be had, the Revelia is a dark place. It's a place where you can kind of do whatever you want, but you also lack a lot of free will. You can't just leave once you're there. And so I think that just the fight to, escape or to find a way out or to help others find a way out is kind of one of the central themes. Of course, like every group may interpret that differently, but it's very much similar to Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. Once you get sucked into a domain, a lot of your motivation becomes how to get out of that domain. There's a lot of reasons to want to confront Heckna, and just kind of witnessing what you do at the Revelia is kind of reason itself. That's not to say that it's all awful, but it's not the wondrous place that it pretends to be. Like beneath that wonder is a lot of kind of grim activity.
This is also like a master's thesis waiting to happen. So you can limit the scope of it by talking about just Heckna or just the Revelia. What do you think is the relationship between comedy and horror?
I think that there's a huge link between comedy and horror because I think both are very subjective. And I think that sometimes comedy taken to extreme limits can be someone else's horror. And I think the things that we find funny, sometimes that's, at someone else's expense. And so I think that it's a complicated relationship, but I personally really enjoy horror that has bits of comedy because I think it alleviates some of the darker themes in horror. And I like comedy that, brings in a bit of horror because it really makes it not necessarily more powerful, but I think they kind of elevate each other as genres. That's also why I enjoy fairy tales, because they kind of hone in on similar aspects of that, where they have these moments of levity mixed with these really dark and grim moments. What makes Hecna fun is that he's genuinely funny. I want people to laugh at the table and just be like, wow, like that was like a bad pun or something like that, and kind of have those like fun but cringy moments, because I do think that when a villain makes you laugh, that makes them dangerous too, because they kind of can manipulate your emotions toward them. Because I think that comedy can be like the great unifier. Like I think when we find things that everyone can find funny or joyful, that's really powerful. So when people can manipulate that, that's when things get really scary.
What does Heckna and the Revelia tell us about the world we live in now?
So many things, honestly. I think that we, especially this year, during a global pandemic and a lot of complicated things happening in the world, a lot of us are looking for ways to escape into our favorite stories and favorite media. We want to remember what it's like to, be kids and just have fun and just fully immerse ourselves in a fun environment. But I think it's also that there's a price to pay for full escapism, because we can't necessarily bury our heads in the sand and ignore important things in the world. So I think like at this time in our lives, a lot of us are trying to find the balance between how do we, stay informed and connected to what's happening in the real world while also, protecting our mental health and finding fun and joy where we can. So not to get like too high level with it, but I think in a lot of ways that's kind of what's embodied in the Revelia is people who wanted to escape, but they kind of went too far and now they're lost. And so I think that getting lost in things that we kind of depend on in terms of like the art and stories that we love is kind of a thing that all creatives go through. Like how much of myself to put into this, fictional story without totally losing myself. So I think in that way, it's very relatable. And I think that when you look to someone like Heckna, who really doesn't care about anyone but himself, about what he has created and will continue to create no matter how much it hurts other people, like, I think that's kind of like a good lesson for all creators to keep in mind is our success and creativity ever like at the expense of someone else? I guess that's a long way of saying that. I think there's a lot of relevancy, but it's just another option for people to have a fun time at their table, and sometimes that's all a game needs to be.
Is there anything that we missed? Anything that you want to make sure we mention or cover?
I think that the main thing would be that despite talking about horror and the manipulation that Hecna might inflict on characters playing through this game, I do really want to emphasize how important it is to have safety tools at your table. I think with a character like Hecna, those things are more important than ever, because it should still be a fun experience for everyone at the table, including the dungeon master. And so when you're playing a character like Hecna, who really doesn't have limits or doesn't really adhere to, the polite society, that you make sure that you establish what those lines are for your table to make it fun, because it should be fun. It should be funny. You should make lasting memories, but it shouldn't be a campaign that is hurting anyone's feelings. That's really not the point of it. Even with a wily villain like Hecna, even Hecna doesn't necessarily want that. As evil as he is, he still wants you to have fun playing this game.
If you want to bring Heckna to your table or play in the Revelia, you can do that even before the book releases.
If you would like to download the free Heckna playtest for now, you can go to thedeckofmany.com, and the full Heckna book will be available there in early 2021. That'll be a beautiful hardcover. They also are doing a special edition hardcover that has just an incredible cover. It's like has gold foil on it. It's so cool. So yeah, there's going to be lots of Heckna goodies to get. Minis, they're making minis. Yeah. Hit Point Press has it going on. They just like have all this stuff on lock. They make the most beautiful products.
Thanks for listening to Making a Monster. If you like what you've heard and you want to support the show, please share it with the people you play games with. Your recommendation will go a long way toward helping people trust me with their time and attention, and it's a real gift to me and the creators I feature. You can also make the show better by supporting me on Ko-fi. It's a digital tip jar that will help me do things like license music for the show and release bonus episodes more often. When you do, you'll get sneak peeks of upcoming episodes and a sense of camaraderie and partnership, usually reserved for adventuring parties. You'll find all those links in the show notes or at scintilla.studio/monster. That's scintilla.studio/monster. On that page, you'll also find art from the game that Hit Point Press provided as part of some promotional consideration for this episode. The song you heard under the opening narration is called Jolly Jamboree. It's one of 10 Heckna-themed tracks produced for the Kickstarter by Mint Potion. Here's where to find more of Ashley Warren's work.
So you can find all my work at my website, which is scribemind.com. Just the words scribe and mind smushed together to be one word. And you can follow me on Twitter at Ashley N.H. Warren. And I'd also like to invite you to join the RPG Writer Workshop community, which is at rpgwriterworkshop.com. We are running our Write Your First Adventure workshop in November, and we have a ton of new courses and programs coming in 2021. So that's a great place to go to get started in adventure design. The registration deadline is October 31st. But if you are interested in taking our other courses that are available year-round, we do have other courses in our catalog. So there's always something to learn and participate in at any time of year.
Ashley Warren, thank you so much for being on the show. This is really exciting. I haven't done an evil clown yet. I knew I was going to at some point. I'm glad it's this one.
Well, I'm glad to have introduced evil clowns to your podcast catalog. So thank you for having me.